This Shabbat, we are delighted to welcome Rabbi Michael Zedek as our scholar in residence. He is the spiritual leader of Emmanuel Congregation in Chicago since 2004. He is the author of many books, the winner of many awards, including being honored by the National Conference of Christians and Jews. He is known among North American Reform rabbis as a rabbi's rabbi, as a mensch, and as a great storyteller. So he's with us tonight, tomorrow, and on Sunday in celebration of his most recent book entitled Taking Miracles Seriously. And it's a perfect text for this month of Elul as we're preparing for the holidays. Please, Rabbi Zedek.
Shabbat Shalom. So far, I'm delighted to be here. And every speaker has a little post with regard to introductions. So here's mine. You can use it without attribution. Of all the introductions I've ever received, that's the most recent. I'm told I have a good 10 minutes, and I'll try to make good use of them. And I hope there'll be other opportunities for us to learn and grow and encounter each other. And Mazel Tov already. So here we go. Before I became captured and raptured, joyfully involved in the rabbinate, I had a brief stint as a teacher of English and writing. And in that capacity, I was taught to teach that there are 7 basic plots. Some argue, by the way, 6. More of that during the week. 7 basic plots, which is a very interesting window because that would suggest that how different cultures tell a particular story would be a window into the values of that particular tradition, since there are only a certain number of stories. So far, so good? I haven't lost you yet? Okay. All right, I'm trying. So for instance, a very specific illustration. How many of you have heard the term Valhalla? Valhalla, if I were to ask you to give, the Viking notion of the afterlife or the Norse heaven. Fair? So here's a quickie on Valhalla. Automatic admission, die in battle. Pretty clear notion this is a warrior society, right? Second, in Valhalla, you fight all day against the most worthy of adversaries. At the setting of the sun, you are invited into the mead hall. That's a nice word for a tavern. And you spend the evening drinking to no ill effect and to great excess. And here we go with an unwoke word. And you are served by the most willing wenches available. Every desire is met. And then at the rising of the sun, you do it all again, over and over. That's eternity. That is quite clearly a story written by men. Fair? Now, when Jewish tradition begins to speculate about notions of the afterlife, one of the first ideas it comes up with is the notion that the afterlife is a schoolroom. Now, that may be some people's view of hell, but a schoolroom filled with the greatest scholars of antiquity, and you get to study with them. Now, notice a very lovely subtlety. All, not just the Jewish ones. It's an important little nuance in that story, but much deeper. The life of the mind is precious in this version of values of the same story. So let's get a little deeper into 2 stories that I think open a worldview and open a window into the Jewish heart of the matter. Here's the Buddhist version of this particular story. A woman's only child dies. She goes to see the Buddha. Restore my child to life. He says to her, bring me a mustard seed from a home that has not known sorrow, and I shall restore your child to life. And of course, she understands what the Buddha is teaching her. There is no such home. By the way, mustard seed, for those of you who are not acquainted with kitchen stuff, very, very small, right? Just bring me the littlest piece of stuff. A subatomic particle would be the modern telling of the story, okay? Here's the Jewish version of that story. A woman's only child dies. She goes to see Elisha. Now, Elisha, for those of you who had a hard time in Sunday school or don't remember the lessons, Elisha's the one after Elijah, and he does a CPR-like reviving of a child who seems to have died. So he's the right one for folklore to pick. Bring me a mustard seed from a home that has not known sorrow, and I will restore your child to life. Same story so far, right? Now it's going to become a Jewish story. She goes looking. No one could imagine a Jewish mother being told, this is what you need. All right, forget it. Now here's where it gets even, to my mind, more exquisite. Many years later, they meet. Little subtle detail. He recognizes her. They don't recognize each other. He says to her, why didn't you come back to me? And she says, well, at first I was desperately looking for that mustard seed that would restore my child to life. But I found in every home I entered there was pain. And I was too busy trying to relieve pain to return to you. Now, the Buddhist story teaches a wisdom. It's the wisdom of acceptance. What is what is what is. The Jewish version teaches the wisdom of struggle. There's a difference between the world as it is and the world as it should be. And boy, do we know a little too much about that lately. The difference between the world as it is and the world as it should be. And our task, for as long as the breath of life happens to reside in us, is to try to bridge some of that distance, to make a difference that the world should be more of what it ought to be. And that, lo and behold, reminds me of a story. As far as I can tell in terms of the research I've done so far, this particular rabbi, in the 37 volumes of the Babylonian Talmud, appears all of twice, which is to say he's not the most important character in the Talmud. The sages are having a debate in the tractate called Avodah Zarah. It literally means strange worship, idolatry. Whether it is permissible or forbidden to go to the gladiatorial games of ancient Rome. Would you go to a Toronto Argonauts game, in short, right? That would be the semi-equivalent. That was my reference to being in Canada, which I had. So, of course, the sages are going to say, no, we must keep our distance to some horror, such brutality. And then Rabbi Nathan, for the first time at the academy, opens his mouth and says, we have to go. Now they ask him, I'd like to think, before we throw him out, let's find out what's going on here. So they ask Talmudic friend, Mahasiba, what's your reasoning? And he says, when the crowd shouts for the blood of the defeated gladiator and goes thumbs down, our job is to shout thumbs up. That's a heck of a job description. Not easy in a world, but it is a heck of a job description. I don't care what any of us do for a living. You never retire from the notion of trying to bridge some of the distance between the world as it is and the world as it should be, and to shout thumbs up. We're often described as prisoners of hope. I can imagine far worse things to be captured by. Hope, tikva. Elie Wiesel once suggested, he suggested a lot of things, but one of the things he suggested is that God created humanity because God loves stories. Stories open a window. They open a window into what we are called to be and what we shall be. I'm looking forward to the rest of this weekend where we might share a few more stories, and I'm especially looking forward to celebrating B'nai Mitzvah tomorrow, and I'll try not to talk too long tomorrow either. Okay? That'll be my bat mitzvah gift to you. Shabbat Shalom.